Let me now pass on to Willis's description of classroom interaction. Willis departs from the observation that most language classrooms have one feature in common. Language is used for two purposes. It serves both as the subject matter of the lesson and as the medium of instruction. It is precisely this dual role that makes language lessons difficult to describe. In order to produce a clear and useful description of the structure of language classroom discourse, it is necessary to have an analytic model which can distinguish and separate these two uses of language, but at the same time preserve the flow of the interaction and reveal the relationship between the two. In seeking to separate the two uses of language, and thus to clarify this two-level structure, Willis adopts the term outer and inner. The outer structure is a mechanism for controlling and stimulating utterances in the inner structure, which gives formal practice in the foreign language. In other words, the outer structure provides the framework of the lesson, the language used to socialize, organize, explain, and check, and generally to enable the pedagogic activities to take place. In some classrooms around the world, more usually in countries where the target language is not the medium of instruction, all or most of this outer language is in the learner's mother tongue. The inner language consists of the target forms of the language that the teacher has selected as learning goals. These are generally phrases, clauses, or sentences presented as target forms, quoted as examples, repeated and drilled or otherwise practiced by the class, often as discrete items. The sequence of utterances bearing little or no resemblance to possible sequences in normal discourse in some cases, whereas in other cases it is possible to find highly interactive chunks of language. In any case, this is part of the language rehearsal that students need in order to acquire the language. Let us pass on to a task. Let us analyze the following classroom interaction sequence. Try to identify instances of the outer and inner structure language.
Let's erase Fred, let's erase me, and let's erase animals for now. Okay, so we're going to focus on plants. Now you've already told me a lot about plants. We know that plants don't move, but they're alive. They make their own food, they grow, they make oxygen, they drink water, and they feel. You know a lot about plants already. That's wonderful. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to watch a video, okay? Can all of you see it over here? All right, now what we're going to do, the first time you watch it, you just watch it. And then the second time we watch it, I'm going to have you write some stuff, okay? All right, so let's get started. Now what I want you to do is we're going to listen to it again. Notice how plants are also not very noisy, are they? They're very quiet. Okay, so we have the quiet music because plants are quiet. Okay, so we're going to open it up again, and I want you to just write down some things that you see, okay? What are some of the things that you notice in this video? All right, now you're going to see some things about why we need plants. Now, this is going to be our big question. And it's up here. Okay? So this is our big question. And we're going to be talking about this in all of the lessons that we work with in this unit, in 2 units in fact. Why do we need plants? So I'm sure you have some answers already, and you're also going to have some questions. All right? So we want to think about why we need plants. Now, I'm going to play it again, and you can write you can do three things. You can either draw pictures, or you can write words, or you can write full sentences, okay? You can write anything that you see, all right? So you all have your pencils ready? All right, let's get started.
In the extract, it's possible to identify the outer structure provided by the teacher giving instructions on the task to be done. As part of inner structure language, it is possible to identify the language of the videos through which students are actually carrying out a task that they would do in the real world, which is to listen about plants and to take down notes on the information that they need. Most of the outer structure is given by the teacher giving instructions and organizing the task. In terms of the inner structure, something interesting is taking place. Most of this inner structure depends directly on the outer structure. But isn't there any moment in which students can interact without this outer structure? Well, Willis notes there are classroom activities such as role plays in which there is a higher level of independence of inner structure from outer structure. While this pseudo-interaction is actually in progress in role plays, for example, it can be temporarily independent of the outer structure. Take the example of a role play with a classmate sitting next to you in class. The two students together can complete the required exchange or series of exchanges independently without teacher intervention until they finish, at which point the teacher's follow-up move takes the discourse back to the outer structure. So we can see that within inner structure language there are independent as well as dependent language uses with reference to the outer structure. In the example that we have just analyzed, you identify only instances of dependent inner structure. How do students tell inner from outer structure? Well, first, they may recognize the role of the teacher, that is, the teacher encouraging an open discussion. If the teacher is in the role of instructor, the likelihood is that of an inner requirement, so probably students will immediately recognize, and most teachers will use explicit boundary exchanges followed by a series of direct and informed exchanges, which tell students what to do and how to do it. In the language classrooms, they are often explicitly given the words to do it with. Secondly, if there are no explicit boundary exchanges, students may deduce from the preceding series of exchanges, paying special attention to the teacher's follow-up moves, how they are to respond, unless the teacher signals in some way that it is not, for example, by adding the word really to the question and changing the stress. Thirdly, the structure and length of the initiating move itself is revealing and likely to make students pay more attention to form. And finally, paralinguistic features such as intonation and kinesics can give a lot of clues. If a teacher says something slowly and deliberately, it is likely to be the inner language, inner structure language. This often involves a teacher breaking an utterance up into more tone units than would usually in normal conversation and using a different stress pattern. Let us pass on to another task. Analyze this extract. What types of structure does this classroom extract show? Try to identify outer, inner independent, and inner dependent structure language. How are inner and outer structure marked in the extract? Try identifying examples.
Okay, clap one. Clap two. Speaking. So in pairs together in your groups, ask each other, what do you do in the morning together? Work together. Ready, steady, go! What do you do in the morning? Tell us about Wendy. Wendy, stand up. Everyone, listen and look. So, Angel, tell us about Wendy.
In the morning.
Tell us about Wendy. Tell us about Wendy. What does she do in the morning? She brushes her teeth. Very good. Sit down, please. So, who can tell me about Serena in your group? What does she do in the morning? She wakes up. Yes, she wakes up. Okay, Bob, what do you do in the morning?
I sit down.
Where?
Home.
Oh, you stay at home. You stay at home. Hannah, what do you do in the morning?
I wash my face.
Okay, so there was a warm-up. The next question will be for the boys, so you can earn some points. Are you ready for the next one? So in twos, ask each other, what do you do in the afternoon? Ready, steady, go! For example, let's say, wake up, everyone say,
Wake up.
like this. So in your groups, check the answers. Check the answers.
Wake up. Wake up.
In this example, it's possible to identify outer, inner independent as well as inner dependent structure language. Most of the class is organized by the teacher with very clear instructions, that is, the outer structure in which she gives instructions, she organizes tasks. Then there are a set of different inner structure language activities in which students have to interact among themselves. And then there are instances in which teacher controls and checks these tasks. In that case, that would be an example of inner dependent structure, whereas when students are interacting among themselves, those are examples of inner independent structure. The changes from outer to inner structure are given by the choice of words, the ways in which teachers mark through signals the way in which students have to behave and the ways in which they have to pay attention to specific linguistic items. They use certain key phrases that would operate as boundary signals. When examining utterances that occur on the inner and comparing them with utterances of the outer, Willis notes that there are striking differences both in exchange structure and move structure. She notes that a great proportion of classroom interaction is of the outer and inner dependent language structure, with few instances of the inner independent language taking place. in classrooms that are supposed to prepare students for authentic language use outside the classroom. This observation makes us wonder on issues of power, control, and autonomy in educational institutions, and encourage educators to a revision of the current teaching methods used. A set of questions come to our minds. What is the impact of so much teacher control in language classrooms? How does this affect language acquisition? In what ways can research help develop more autonomous-driven language uses in class? These and many other questions are being explored by linguists in the field.